Hello, friends. The 724th day of the war between Russia and Ukraine continues. And so, Avdiivka was officially abandoned by the Ukrainian army. At night, Commander-in-Chief Syrsky announced the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from Avdiivka in order to save the lives of soldiers. I decided to withdraw our units from the city and switch to defense on more advantageous lines, the general said. General Tarnavsky said that the withdrawal of personnel from Avdiivka took place in accordance with a plan developed taking into account various scenarios and a possible change in the operational situation. And yet, at the final stage of the operation, under pressure from superior enemy forces, several Ukrainian servicemen were captured, the general wrote. Also, the 3rd Assault Brigade, which was transferred to Avdiivka, announced its withdrawal. We are retreating to prepare positions in order to return and deliver an even stronger blow. I thank the command for a balanced decision. The battle continues, said Brigade Commander Belarusian. Zelensky also commented on the retreat of the Ukrainian armed forces from Avdiivka in his speech at the Munich conference. Like Syrsky, he stated that the retreat from the city was necessary to save the lives of the soldiers. He also stated that the reason for leaving Avdiivka was an artificial shortage of weapons. Later, videos and photographs of Russian flags being raised from different areas in Avdiivka began to appear online. The Russians raised flags over the Avdiivka coke plant, over the city administration, and over the 9th quarter. Thus, the entire territory of Avdiivka came under the control of the Russians, which is also confirmed by both Ukrainian and Western experts. The new front line runs east of Lastichkiny. By the way, according to Russian sources, the operation in Avdiivka is commanded by Russian General Mordvyshev, who is known for leading the assault on Mariupol. What are the consequences of the retreat from Avdiivka? This is Russia's first strategically important victory since the spring-summer of 2022, when Mariupol, the land corridor to Crimea, and most of the Luhansk and Kherson regions were captured. The capture of Bakhmut was not a strategic victory due to the fact that it did not open up space for further advancement and did not solve any strategic problems. The capture of Avdiivka solves at least one strategic problem for Russia. It moves the front away from Donetsk. The city's fall was sealed last week after a Russian breakthrough south of the coke plant effectively began the collapse of the defenses. For some time there were rumors that the Ukrainian armed forces were planning to launch a counterattack, but apparently there was not enough strength for this, and therefore the only possible option was chosen: retreat. As to whether everyone managed to leave Avdiivka, there is conflicting information. According to some sources, the main forces of the Ukrainian army managed to leave. According to others, some units still remain in the city and are fighting their way to the mainland. The reasons for the loss of Avdiivka to the armed forces of Ukraine and military analysts call the superiority of the Russians in manpower, the lack of ability of the Ukrainian army to find enough reserves to launch a counterattack in the city or at least hold positions in it, the total superiority of Russia in artillery, as well as the massive use by the Russians of powerful adjustable air bombs. The Russian military has significantly increased its use of drones. Also, some Ukrainian military personnel write about the improvement of battle management and tactics of the Russians, noting that in Avdiivka Russian forces are fighting more professionally than in Bakhmut. As a result, having begun the assault on Avdiivka in October 2023, the Russians took the city in 4 months, much faster than Bakhmut, and with fewer losses. And this is an alarming sign for the Ukrainian armed forces, since using the same method, using the same advantages, the Russians will be able to push through the defenses of the Ukrainian army in other places. The Ukrainian military is already talking about this threat. The further development of military events depends on whether the Ukrainian armed forces will be able to hold the new line of defense, to which Syrsky announced a withdrawal. If they can, then the loss of Avdiivka will not lead to fundamental changes along the entire front line, and especially to a turning point in the war. But if the Russians are able to develop their offensive further, to the west of the Donetsk region towards Pokrovsk, with the prospect of an attack on Pavlorod, this will create a threat to the entire group of the Ukrainian army on the southern front. In this regard, this direction is more promising for the Russians than the offensive from Bakhmut to Chasiv Yar, where it will further run into the large urban agglomeration of Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Druzhkivka, Kostiantynivka. Although it is possible that the Russians will now launch an offensive in a third, even more strategically important direction, on Zaporizhzhia and the Dnipro, for which the Ukrainian military has already announced preparations. The informational and political significance of the loss of Avdiivka is also great. This happened on the eve of the second anniversary of the invasion, a month before the Russian presidential elections, against the background of problems with the allocation of American aid, and also immediately after the resignation of Commander-in-Chief Zaluzhny and his replacement with Syrsky, which was ambiguously received by the public. The fall of Avdiivka threatens to make all these problematic issues even more problematic for the Ukrainian military political leadership. It also strengthens the position of those forces in Ukraine and the West who advocate an early end to the war according to the Korean scenario, with the argument the longer we fight, the more people and territories we lose, and the worse the conditions for ending the war will be. The authorities of Ukraine and leading Western countries are currently opposed to this option, and it is unlikely that the loss of Avdiivka itself will change their position. But if the situation at the front continues to deteriorate for the Ukrainian army, then the concept in Kiev and the West may change. Although in this case the question will be open. Will Putin agree to end the war? And if so, on what conditions? Meanwhile, former People's Deputy Litsenko, who is now fighting, said that the Russians have taken a stable pace of the offensive and can advance further after capturing Avdiivka. Before this there was Maryanka, before Maryanka, Bakhmut, before Bakhmut, Lysychansk. Did you catch the trend? Why is the plot repeating itself? Why are Kurahovi, Vuhledar, Stepovy, Kupiansk next in line? What are the reasons to believe that Kharkiv and Zaporizhzhia are next? But none know the limit where the Russians, having taken such a stable pace, will stop, unless at natural boundaries, which are the Dnipro River and the northern Belarusian swamps. This is their plan, he wrote on Facebook. Litsenko considers the massive use of guided bombs to be one of the main advantages of the Russians. According to him, Russia has huge stockpiles of these bombs, and with their help, the Russian army is destroying the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces, even going so far as to carry out targeted strikes on drone operators. You can make 1 million FPV drones, but 1 million guided aerial bombs will fly off for the operators' calculations. They're already flying, he said. Litsenko says that guided bombs are much cheaper than missiles and have the same destructive power and relative accuracy. He also notes that Ukraine does not use similar Western bombs because its aircraft cannot rise to the required altitude. Ukraine, according to him, does not produce such bombs. The story with the kamikaze drones, Shad, is repeating itself. Ukraine, suffering from effective weapons that the Russians have been using for more than a year, cannot create a symmetrical response on the required scale, although it has the resources, technologies, and people for this. It does not. Ukraine has only one thing, the ability to organize everything to solve a specific, obvious task, Litsenko said. Ukrainian photographers Kostiantin and Vlada Liberovs, who document the war, wonder around which Ukrainian city next after Avdiivka the Russians will try to push through the defenses of the Ukrainian army. So the next 4 is Pokrovsk or Kostiantynivka right away, write the Liberovs, criticizing the command of the Ukrainian armed forces due to the lack of a second line of defense in Avdiivka. Where is the second line of defense? Using a map of the deep state, the claws around the city began to form almost a year ago. It certainly wasn't a surprise. So where is the second line of defense? The Liberovs asked themselves. While the military was waiting for weapons for the Zaporizhzhia counteroffensive, the enemy mined fields, concreted trenches, built entire underground cities. Why didn't we do the same in Avdiivka? Moreover, a blind defense, the purpose of which is to deplete the enemy's forces, is like our official strategy, write the Liberovs. Friends, preparing these daily reports has become my full-time job, and I have no other job for obvious reasons. There have been few views on the channel lately, which is why I asked for your help. If you have the opportunity to support me financially, I would be very grateful. Thank you very much and see you in the next video.